Hey, everybody. My name is Rick Howard. I'm the CEO of the all-volunteer nonprofit cybersecurity Canon project. And this is the obligatory why you should listen to me slide. Okay. Essentially, I'm an old timer. I've been around in the industry so long that I've earned the honorific title of get off my lawn champion. Okay. Meaning I've reached the point in my career where I get to stand on my porch, raise my fist in the air, and tell all of you young whippersnappers why you're doing it all wrong. Right. And by the way, that's the best joke I have in the slide deck. So if you're not at least smiling right now, this is going to be a long 15 minutes. My main focus of study is cybersecurity strategies that buy down risk. I've even written a book about the subject called Cybersecurity First Principles, a reboot of strategy and tactics. And that's my wife and daughter being idiots at the RSA Conference bookstore when it first came out. But in my spare time, I'm the CEO of this all-volunteer nonprofit, and our vision is to be the InfoSec profession's first source for curated, timeless, and must-consume wisdom. I created it back in 2014 when I was the Palo Alto Network CSO. One of my jobs was to visit customers, and one thing I noticed was that many of my peers had stopped doing any kind of deep reading. They were overwhelmed with too much content. They didn't have enough time to consume it all anyway, and there was no way to predetermine if the content they were consuming was any good or not. I noticed that heroically, in an attempt to stay caught up in a cybersecurity landscape that is constantly changing, many of us try to consume as much information as possible. We listen to books and podcasts on triple speed. We prefer simplistic bullet point blogs from security vendors. And we rely on summaries of important content, not really engaging with the subject, but reading the overview of it. When ChatGPT emerged in November 2022, we started to rely on it and other large language models as the tool of choice for these kind of quick hit digests. Now, this may seem counterintuitive, but that's just wrong. I get it. Summaries are useful for a quick update. But when you really want to understand a thing, the only way to do it is to take your time with it, to wallow in it, to challenge it, to connect it to other things that you already know. And as an aside, were you all as excited to see the Fantastic Four movie that came out this summer? How about Superman? Well, I was, and I think they're both damn good, right? And a little fact about me, I didn't really start reading for real until I was in the 7th grade. A high school senior gave me his collection of old comic books, and this particular book, Avengers 103, was on top of the pile, and I was hooked. I've been a comic book nerd ever since, and I love all the movies, the great ones like Avengers Endgame, and the good ones like Captain America Winter Soldier, and even the bad ones like the Batman movie from the 1960s. They all have a special place in my heart because comic books started me reading. I'm reminded of David Ullen's quote from his book, The Lost Art of Reading. He says, reading, after all, is an act of resistance in a landscape of distraction, a matter of engagement in a society that seems to want nothing more than for us to disengage. It connects us at the deepest levels. It is slow rather than fast. And that's the beauty and the challenge. In a culture of instant information, it requires us to pace ourselves. And I love that line. It is slow rather than fast. And, you know, this may seem arrogant, but I've said for years that if you've read one book on the subject, you're most likely the smartest person in the room on that subject because, you know, nobody reads books anymore. Read two and you're the go-to expert for the group. And I like to quote my man Tyrion Lannister from the HBO TV series Game of Thrones. A man needs books as a sword needs a whetstone if it is to keep its edge. Exactly. You don't run the sword across the whetstone a couple of times after yesterday's big battle and expect it to be ready for tomorrow's. It takes hours to bring a blade up to speed. And the same is true for honing your brain. Here's the thing. What if I told you that flailing wildly, trying to read everything in an attempt to stay caught up isn't as impactful to your career as making time for a deep dive on that one topic? That might change everything in your world. That might give you that one insight that makes all the pieces come together. And with all of our technology, the AI summaries, the YouTube videos, the transcripts, the podcasts, and everything else, Books, and I include audiobooks in that category, are still the best knowledge transfer device that we have. That and a notebook to record your thoughts are really all that you need. As Sam Marinko says, a single great book, mined deeply, can prove a powerful education. Remember, the goal is not to get through the material as fast as possible. The goal is to learn from the experience of others. As Rene Descartes said, the reading of all good books is like conversing with the finest people of past centuries. And as Henry Thoreau said, read the best books first, or you may not have a chance to read them at all. And that's where the Canon comes in, this open source project that we have. The CyberCanon project is an all-volunteer and ever-changing roster of senior cyber professionals who read the books and make recommendations about what to read. We do that through book reviews that we publish on our website, and we set it up like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. At the end of each year, the committee decides which books to induct into the Hall of Fame. And if you find any of this valuable at all, don't forget to hit the donate button. We are an all-volunteer nonprofit after all. We need a little money to keep the lights on. The point is that the CyberCanon website is a curated list of must-consume wisdom. If you work in a zero trust shop, what's the one book you should read to understand the complexities of that strategy? According to the CyberCanon committee, that would be George Finney's Project Zero Trust. If you're looking to improve your career, where would you go to get some advice? The committee recommends that you take a look at Helen Patton's Navigating the Cybersecurity Career Path. After 15 years, the CyberCanon committee has inducted just over 50 books into the Hall of Fame. If you want to follow Thoreau's suggestion to read the good books first, start with the CyberCanon's 50. Now, I get asked all the time, which books from the CyberCanon 50 do I recommend first? And I always give it a different answer depending on what day of the week it is and what mood I'm in. But here are my three favorites today. I always start with my very favorite, The Cuckoo's Egg, published by Dr. Cliff Stoll in 1989. This is the book that turned IT professionals of a certain age, people like me, into cybersecurity professionals. Before Cuckoo's Egg, cybersecurity really wasn't a thing yet. Back then, Dr. Stoll was an astronomer at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, designing telescope optics for the Keck Observatory and the lab. But his project lost funding and he was out of a job. Everybody liked him at the lab, though. He was wicked smart, charming. He had a touch of the autism, and he was and is a lefty liberal. I mean, there's middle of the road, left of center, extremely left of center, and then there's Cliff. He makes his own clothes, gardens his own food. He has long hair and earrings. He's one of those kinds of guys, but a good guy all the same. So the IT department said, hey, Cliff, why don't you come over here and run this Unix lab for us? You're a smart guy. You understand Unix. And oh, by the way, we have this accounting error for the student database records. Back then, we charged students for computer time, and every month across the entire student body, it was off by 75 cents. So, Cliff, run this Unix lab for us, track down this 75-cent accounting error, and when your astronomy job gets its funding next year, you can return. But in the meantime, you can help us out. Well, that 75-cent accounting error was the first indicator of what very well may be the first cyber espionage campaign run by the Russians using East German hacker mercenaries to break into U.S. academic institutions in order to break into U.S. government institutions, because back then there wasn't any security. It was just all strings and cans. So Cliff treats it like a science experiment. He collects data, develops hypotheses, and he single-handedly invents incident response. But the best part is that here's this lefty liberal who hates the man and anything the government is doing, but now he's on the phone every week trying to help the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA understand the magnitude of the problem. There's even a love story that me and my wife really appreciated, and there's a chocolate chip cookie recipe in the back that I've tried. This book came out when I was in grad school back in the late 1980s, and instead of doing my thesis, I spent the weekend reading it, and it changed my career trajectory like it did many of my peers. I was going to be an IT guy. For the first time, being a security guy was an option, and many of us leapt at the chance. Back then, authors put their real email addresses in their book. So I sent Dr. Stoll a gushing email telling him how much I loved his book. He answered me in about 15 minutes, and I've been a fan ever since. If you haven't read this one, by all means, put it at the top of your reading queue. The next book I want to recommend is The Perfect Weapon: How the Cyber Arms Race Set the World Afire, published in 2018 by New York Times journalist David E. Sanger. It covers nation-state cyber activity from the likes of China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and the United States from about 2010 to 2018. And if you can't bring yourself to reading the entire book, there is an excellent 2-hour HBO documentary that covers the topic that is very good. Sanger was the producer. But here's a quick story from the book. In 2014, President Obama launched an electronic warfare operation referred to as Left of Launch, targeting the North Korea nuclear missile program. The idea was similar to what he did with Stuxnet, Operation Olympic Games, back in 2010, that targeted the Iranian nuclear enrichment facility at Natanz. In this operation, the U.S. targeted the North Korean missile itself, the Musudan, an intermediate-range ballistic missile that could strike U.S. bases in the Pacific. While testing, North Korea attempted multiple launches, but most of them failed, about 88% of them. Many exploded in midair, and Sanger claims that even though we don't know for sure, most of those failures were due to the left of launch operation. Now, that operation didn't get the headlines that Stuxnet did, but that's why you read these books, especially this one. The deep dive gets you the details of things that you may never have heard about. My last recommendation is Tracers in the Dark, the global hunt for crime lords of cryptocurrency by Andy Greenberg. And I know that Andy's coming on to do a panel later on to talk about his book and other things. This is the best cybercrime book I've read in over a decade. And according to Greenberg, the book is about the advents of cryptocurrency tracing as a law enforcement investigative technique. What that means is that if you had any notion that cryptocurrency transactions in general and Bitcoin transactions in particular were anonymous, Greenberg completely shatters that idea. He documents the research of Sarah Mickeljohn, a university researcher, 2 IRS special agents, Tigran Gambarian and Chris Janzinski, I can hardly say that guy's name, and Michael Gronecker, the CFO of Chainalysis. And then he tells the stories of how law enforcement used those research techniques to investigate some of the most successful counter cybercrime operations in recent years. Silk Road, the criminals behind the Colonial Pipeline attacks, Mt. Gox, the Bitcoin exchange, and the BTCE Bitcoin trading platform, and criminal marketplaces like Alpha Bay, Welcome to Video, and Hansa. So if you're an InfoSec professional, the canon is filled with must-read books like those 3 I just talked about, and there's literally something in there for everybody, curated by a team of veteran professionals, volunteers, open source, books that you haven't read by now. If you haven't read these books by now, you may have a hole in your cybersecurity education. The Cybersecurity Canon Project is the first place you should look for curated, timeless, and must-consume wisdom. So that's a wrap for me today. Here's what I'd like you to take away from this presentation. First, the business of learning about something new or brushing up on something that you thought you knew is counterintuitive. You don't need to skim everything as fast as possible. Instead, take your time with the subject, understand it, wallow in it, and write about it. And the best and most impactful knowledge transfer devices for that purpose are books. If you want to follow Henry Thoreau's lead and read the best books first, start with the CyberCanon Hall of Fame books, the CyberCanon 50. And to start you out, I gave you 3 of my favorites from that list: Cuckoo's Egg, Perfect Weapon, and Tracers in the Dark. I do have some homework for you because you can't listen to a seminar and not get homework. First, check out my book, Cybersecurity First Principles. Check out the CyberCanon website and read some of the reviews. Donate if you like what we're doing there. And then pick a book and read it deeply and take some notes. Then pick the next one and repeat and repeat and repeat. All right. And you will like what you get at the end of that. So that's really at this time. Thanks everybody for attending my keynote.